The millionaire ignored her last message, an ultrasound photo. 4 years later, he met the daughters he never knew he had. The office on the 42nd floor of a gleaming tower in the heart of Manhattan offered a privileged view over New York City. Ethan Carter adjusted the knot of his Italian silk tie as he watched the chaotic traffic far below. Streams of headlights flowed through the streets like rivers of gold. At 31, Ethan had built a real estate empire worth millions. Yet at that moment, standing inside an office that most people could only dream of owning, all he felt was a strange emptiness in his chest. "Mr. Carter?" His secretary's voice pulled him back to reality. "The meeting with the Korean investors starts in 15 minutes. Ethan nodded without turning away from the window. 3 days had passed since his argument with Claire Bennett, and he could still hear every word of the conversation that had changed everything. "You'll never truly love me, Ethan," Claire had told him. "To you, I'm just another project. Something you can control, organize, and fit into your schedule." Her words still echoed painfully in his mind. And, as always, Ethan had responded with the coldness he used as armor. "If you can't understand that my career has to be my priority right now, then maybe we really don't have a future together." Claire had left his apartment that night with tears in her eyes. Since then, there had been nothing but deafening silence between them. His iPhone vibrated on the desk. Ethan glanced at the screen. Claire Bennett. For half a second, his heart accelerated. Then he forced himself to regain control. She had called several times over the past few days, and he had ignored every call. Now there was a message. He didn't open it. Instead, he simply swiped across the screen and deleted it. There was nothing left to discuss. Claire was intelligent, talented, beautiful, a brilliant architect any man would have been lucky to have beside him. But Ethan had convinced himself that he didn't have time for the kind of commitment she wanted. His company was preparing to close the biggest deal in its history, a luxury residential development that could redefine the Manhattan property market. "Mr. Carter," his secretary called again. "I'm coming, Emily." Ethan grabbed his Hugo Boss jacket and headed toward the conference room, leaving his phone behind. He had no idea that Claire's deleted message contained only one image, an ultrasound photograph. 2 tiny human figures were clearly visible, and beneath the image was a date showing that she was 8 weeks pregnant. The meeting lasted until late that evening. By the time Ethan returned to his office, it was after 10. The city glittered beneath him like an upside-down field of stars. Only then did he check his phone again. 3 more missed calls from Claire. His phone had been on Do Not Disturb, as it always was during important meetings. This time, he didn't even look to see whether she had sent another message. With one decisive movement, Ethan blocked Claire's number. Then he erased their entire conversation history. A clean break. No drama. No complications. That was better. Or at least that was what Ethan Carter told himself. After all, he had built his empire through fast decisions, calculated risks, and absolute control. Love, as he had learned early in life, was too unpredictable a variable for a man with big ambitions. As he put away his phone and prepared for another lonely night in his luxury penthouse, Ethan had no idea that he had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. For years later, the sound of Ethan's footsteps echoed along the marble corridor of the newly completed Riverside Heights residential complex. In those 4 years, Carter Properties had become one of the largest privately owned development companies in the country. The complex Ethan was inspecting that afternoon would be his most ambitious project yet. 5 luxury towers designed to redefine premium living in New York. "The model apartments are almost perfect, Mr. Carter," said Daniel Brooks, the lead engineer, as they walked toward Building A. "I think buyers are going to be impressed by the details we've added." Ethan nodded, although his attention was divided. It was a bright September afternoon, and a light breeze carried the sounds of children playing from the playground of a neighboring residential community. The laughter was an unusual contrast to Ethan's normal environment. Boardrooms, investor presentations, PowerPoint slides, sales reports, projections, numbers, and more numbers. "How are sales?" Ethan asked, adjusting his sunglasses. "Better than expected. We've already sold 70% of the units before final completion." Daniel sounded proud. The walk-in closets, integrated smart home systems, and private terraces have made a huge difference. They were approaching the recreation area when Ethan suddenly heard a woman's voice. Sophie, don't climb that high. Ethan stopped. Everything inside him froze. He knew that voice, even after 4 years. It was a voice that still appeared in his dreams more often than he would ever admit. Slowly, Ethan turned toward the playground. And there she was, Claire. She was sitting on a bench beneath the shade of a maple tree, dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue dress. Her chestnut hair was pulled into a low bun. She looked thinner than he remembered, more serious, more mature. Beside her sat a large work bag, with rolled architectural drawings sticking halfway out. But Claire wasn't what completely paralyzed Ethan. It was the two identical little girls playing nearby. They looked about 4 years old. Both had soft, curly brown hair that shimmered in the sunlight. One was sitting on a swing. The other was pushing the empty swing beside her. Then the girl on the swing turned her head and shouted something to her sister. Ethan's world stopped. Her eyes were green. Not ordinary green. They were exactly like his. A rare emerald shade inherited from his Italian grandmother. People had commented on Ethan's eyes his entire life. Mr. Carter? Daniel's voice sounded as if it were coming from miles away. Are you all right? Ethan couldn't breathe properly. His mind automatically started calculating. 4 years. The final argument. Claire's unanswered calls. The message he had deleted without reading. The other girl suddenly ran toward her sister. Ellie, Claire called after her. Now Ethan could see both children clearly. They didn't just have his eyes. They had the shape of his nose, the line of his jaw, even the small dimple beneath the lower lip that Ethan saw in the mirror every morning. Mommy, can I go on the slide? One of them called. Yes, sweetheart. Just be careful, Claire answered. There was a tenderness in her voice Ethan had never heard before. At that exact moment, Claire looked up from the phone in her hand and saw him. Time stopped. Her brown eyes met his across the playground. Ethan watched a rapid sequence of emotions move across her face. Shock, fear, anger, and something that looked dangerously close to pain. Claire went pale. Her hand instinctively rose to her chest as if trying to calm her heart. Mr. Carter? Daniel asked again, now clearly worried. But Ethan couldn't move. He couldn't look away from the two little girls happily playing only a short distance from him. They had no idea they had just turned a man's entire world upside down. Sophie and Ellie, his daughters. Daughters he had never known existed. For several seconds that felt like an eternity, Ethan and Claire stared at each other across the playground. Everything else seemed muted. The laughter of children. The distant traffic. Even Daniel's voice. Claire moved first. Quickly, she shoved her papers into her bag and stood. Sophie, Ellie, come on girls. It's time to go home. Her voice sounded controlled, but Ethan could hear the tension beneath it. Oh, Mommy, just a little longer, Sophie complained from the slide. Please, Mom, Ellie added. I haven't finished playing. Ethan felt something tighten painfully inside his chest when he heard their voices. They were bright, melodic, full of life. Mr. Carter, are you sure you're okay? Daniel asked. Do you know someone over there? Ethan swallowed hard. Yes. His voice barely worked. I need to talk to someone. Can you give me a few minutes? Daniel frowned, obviously confused, but nodded. Of course. I'll check the banquet hall. I'll meet you there in 15 minutes. Ethan barely registered the response. His legs seemed to move on their own as he slowly walked toward the playground. Claire had managed to convince the girls to gather their toys. She held one daughter's hand in each of hers. As Ethan got closer, he could hear them talking. Mommy, why do we have to go now? We haven't even had lunch, Ellie complained. We'll eat at home, sweetheart. Remember? Mommy made lasagna yesterday. Claire. Ethan's voice sounded rougher than he expected. Claire stopped abruptly. The girls turned curiously toward the tall man in the dark suit who had interrupted their conversation. Hello, Claire finally said after a pause that lasted far too long. Sophie, clearly the more outgoing of the two, spoke first. You're really tall. Are you a giant? For the first time in what felt like years, a genuine smile appeared on Ethan's face. No, I'm not a giant. I'm just a little taller than most people. Ellie leaned toward her sister. He has the same eyes as us. She said it loudly enough for everyone to hear. The innocent observation made Claire turn even paler. She tightened her grip on the girl's hands. Girls, let's go. Claire, wait. Ethan stepped forward. He saw fear in her eyes. We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. Her voice trembled on the final word. Please. Ethan glanced toward the girls. Claire followed his gaze and understood immediately. Whatever happened between them, she didn't want the children trapped in the middle of an adult confrontation. Sophie, Ellie, she said carefully, you can play for 5 more minutes. Mommy needs to talk to this man. The girls exchanged delighted looks and immediately ran back toward the playground. Claire walked several yards away and stopped beneath a tree where she could still watch them, but where they couldn't hear the conversation. Ethan followed. His heart was beating so hard he was sure she could hear it. They're mine. It wasn't a question. Claire crossed her arms protectively. They're my daughters, Ethan. Claire, for God's sake, look at them. They have my eyes. My nose. Even the way they smile. So what? Her eyes began filling with tears. Where were you when I needed you? Where were you when I tried to tell you? Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Claire remembered that nervous gesture from their years together. You tried to tell me? She stared at him in disbelief. Are you kidding me? Her voice rose. I called you 15 times, Ethan. 15. I sent you an ultrasound picture. You blocked me. I never saw an ultrasound. Even as he said the words, the memories started returning. The unopened message. The calls he had deliberately ignored. Claire laughed bitterly. Of course you didn't see it. Because you deleted everything without opening it, didn't you? Ethan said nothing. That's exactly who you were, Claire continued. Whenever something threatened your perfect, controlled world, you erased it and pretended it didn't exist. Her words hit him like a punch. Because she was right. That was exactly what he had done. Claire, you what? She demanded. You're sorry? You want to meet them now because suddenly it's convenient for you. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. I spent 9 months alone, Ethan. 9 months hoping you would call. Hoping you'd show up. Hoping you'd show even the smallest sign that you cared. Ethan felt as though he were drowning. I had to explain to everyone why the father of my children was never there. And later, I had to make excuses whenever they asked why they didn't have a dad like the other kids. Every sentence was another blow of guilt. I didn't know, Ethan whispered. Claire, I swear to you I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Her voice cracked. Then she noticed the girls glancing toward them and lowered her voice. You had your chance, Ethan. More than one chance. And every time you chose to ignore me. Silence settled between them. For years of anger, regret, loneliness, and unspoken words filled that silence. Claire wiped her tears with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself before the girls noticed she was crying. Mommy. Sophie's worried voice brought them back to reality. The little girl stopped playing and walked toward them, Ellie following behind. Are you okay? Claire forced a smile and crouched down. I'm fine, sweetheart. Mommy was just talking to this man about work. You build buildings too? Ellie asked Ethan. Her innocent curiosity overpowered whatever tension she sensed. Ethan looked toward Claire, silently asking permission to answer. Claire gave the smallest nod. Yes, Ethan said, crouching so he was at eye level with the girls. I build buildings. Up close, the resemblance was even more overwhelming. They had his green eyes, his dark, expressive eyebrows, his chin, everything. That's cool, Sophie said seriously. Do you know Spider-Man? Ethan laughed. A real laugh. The first one in years. Unfortunately, no. But if I ever meet him, I promise I'll introduce you. Me too. Ellie asked immediately. Both of you. Claire watched them with a complicated mixture of tenderness and pain. It was impossible to deny that something natural existed between Ethan and the girls. Something deeper than physical resemblance. They seemed instinctively drawn to him. Girls, we really have to go, Claire finally said. You have swimming lessons at 3, remember? Oh right. Sophie slapped her forehead dramatically. I forgot. Come on, Ellie. We're going to be late. The girls ran to collect their remaining toys, giving Ethan and Claire a few final seconds alone. Claire, please, Ethan said quietly. We can't end this here. Yes, we can. Her determination sounded less certain now. You made your choice 4 years ago. I made mine. But now I know. And now what? You want to be a weekend dad? Show up whenever it fits your schedule. Claire shook her head. My daughters are not another project for you to squeeze between meetings. Our daughters, Ethan corrected softly. The word stopped her. Claire closed her eyes and took a slow breath. Don't do that, Ethan. Not now. What do you want me to do? Pretend I didn't see them? Walk away and continue living as if they don't exist. Claire opened her eyes. That's exactly what you did 4 years ago. Ethan had no answer. Because again she was right. Ready, Mommy, Sophie announced as she ran back with her toy bag. Claire took the bag and reached for both daughters' hands. Come on, girls. Bye, Giant Man, Sophie said cheerfully, waving at Ethan. Bye, Building Man, Ellie added. Ethan's chest tightened. Goodbye, girls. His voice was more emotional than he intended. He stood there watching Claire and the children walk toward the parking lot. The girls talked excitedly about swimming lessons, bouncing beside their mother, completely unaware of the emotional earthquake that had just taken place. When they were nearly at the car, Ethan called out, Claire. She stopped, but didn't turn around. I live in the Metropolitan Tower on the Upper East Side. Apartment 1001. If you change your mind, if you ever want to talk. Claire remained still for a few seconds. Then she gave the smallest nod and continued walking. Ethan stayed there until Claire's silver SUV disappeared from view. It carried away 2 little people he now understood were the most important part of his life. And until that afternoon, he hadn't even known they existed. When Daniel returned several minutes later, he found his boss sitting alone on one of the playground benches with his head in his hands. Mr. Carter? Did something happen? Ethan lifted his head. Daniel was shocked to see tears in the eyes of a man he had always considered unbreakable. Daniel, Ethan said, his voice full of an emotion the engineer had never heard from him before. I just found out I'm a father. Ethan couldn't work for the rest of the day. After sending Daniel away with the excuse of a family emergency, which ironically was not a lie, he returned to his penthouse and locked himself inside his study. The walls were decorated with photographs of his most successful developments, his engineering degree, and a framed magazine cover showing him receiving Entrepreneur of the Year. Trophies from a life he had believed was complete. Now all of it seemed meaningless. Ethan opened his laptop. For the first time in years, he couldn't focus on spreadsheets or financial reports. Instead, he typed into Google, Claire Bennett Sophie Ellie. He felt like a stalker, but he couldn't stop himself. Claire kept a very low profile online. Still, through the social media account of her friend Hannah, another architect, Ethan managed to find several photographs. Birthday parties, days at the park, school events, Halloween costumes. In one picture from the previous year, Sophie was dressed as Wonder Woman while Ellie wore a superhero costume of her own. Every photo hurt. 4 years of missed moments. First steps. First words. Their first day at preschool. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Everything. Without him. His phone rang. It was his mother, Margaret. Ethan, sweetheart. How are you? You haven't called me all week. Mom. I'm okay. Just busy with work. He leaned back in his chair and ran a hand through his hair. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. What is it? Do you ever feel like you lost something important because of a decision you made? Something you can't undo? There was a pause. Ethan, that's a very serious question. Did something happen? Just answer me. Please. Margaret sighed. Everyone has regrets, honey. I regret not traveling more when I was younger. I regret not telling your father I loved him more often before he died. Her voice softened. But I learned something. It's never too late to try to repair what can still be repaired. Ethan swallowed against the lump in his throat. What if you hurt someone badly? Someone who has every right to never want to speak to you again? Then I would apologize as many times as necessary. And I would prove with my actions. Not just my words. That I had changed. Margaret paused. Ethan, do you want to tell me what's really going on? Not yet, Mom. Maybe soon. After ending the call, Ethan stared at the ceiling until the sun disappeared completely. He tried to eat dinner and failed. He went to bed. Sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sophie and Ellie. He remembered how Ellie tilted her head when she noticed their matching eyes. Exactly the same way Ethan did when he was thinking. He remembered Sophie's spontaneous smile. It was identical to the smile in Ethan's childhood photographs. The photographs his mother had carefully saved for decades. At 2 a.m, Ethan gave up trying to sleep and walked onto his balcony. New York glittered beneath him. Millions of lights. Millions of lives. Millions of stories. Somewhere out there, his daughters were probably sleeping. Perhaps dreaming about superheroes and swimming lessons. Not knowing that they had a father who had only just discovered their existence. A father who would have given anything to go back for years and answer one single message. Claire couldn't sleep that night either. After finally getting the girls into bed, a process involving 3 bedtime stories, 2 glasses of water, and at least 5 requests for just 5 more minutes, she sat alone in the kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea. Her modest 2-bedroom apartment at Riverside Gardens wasn't luxurious, but it was warm, comfortable, loved. The living room walls were covered with the girls' drawings, family photographs, and framed examples of Claire's architectural work. It was a home built with love, hard work, sleepless nights, freelance projects, and countless sacrifice weekends. Claire picked up her tablet. She opened a folder containing 4 years of memories she had created alone. The first ultrasound picture. The picture Ethan had never seen. Photographs of her growing belly. Hospital pictures. Sophie had been born first at 3:12 p.m. Ellie had followed 5 minutes later. Claire remembered crying from happiness and heartbreak at the same time. Happiness because she was finally holding her daughters. Heartbreak because she was alone during a moment that should have belonged to 2 parents. Why did you have to appear now, Ethan? She whispered. She swiped to a photograph from the girls' first birthday. Both children were covered in chocolate cake, laughing at the camera with the same green eyes that had always reminded Claire of him. Her phone vibrated. A message from Hannah. Are you okay? I saw you earlier and you looked really upset. Want to talk? Claire hesitated. Then typed. Can you come over? I need someone to talk to. The reply arrived almost immediately. On my way. 20 minutes. Hannah arrived with a bottle of wine and a package of cookies, her usual emergency kit for friendship crises. She found Claire sitting on the couch in pajamas with swollen eyes. What happened? Are the girls okay? Hannah immediately sat beside her. The girls are fine. Claire took a breath. Their father showed up. Hannah nearly dropped the wine bottle. What, Ethan? Claire told her everything. The playground. The confrontation. The way the girls had naturally connected with him. Hannah listened in stunned silence, occasionally muttering, "No way," or, "You've got to be kidding me." So what happens now? She asked when Claire finished. What are you going to do? I don't know. Claire rubbed her temples. Part of me just wants to protect them. They're happy. Their life is stable. Why should I risk that by letting him come into their lives and then disappear again when he gets tired of pretending to be a father? And the other part? Claire sighed. The other part saw the way they looked at him, Han. Her voice weakened. They smiled at him like they'd known him forever. And I saw the way he looked at them too. She swallowed. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't obligation. What was it? Love. The word was almost a whisper. Instantly. Hannah studied her. Do you still have feelings for him? The question caught Claire completely off guard. She had prepared herself to talk about the girls, responsibility, consequences. Not about herself. I don't know, she admitted finally. For 4 years I built this version of Ethan in my head. The villain of my story. The man who abandoned me while I was pregnant. She looked down at her hands. But today he looked genuinely shocked. Like he really didn't know. Do you believe him? I want to. Claire's eyes filled again. And that scares me. Hannah poured wine for both of them and stayed quiet for a moment. Can I give you my opinion? Claire nodded. You've already proved you can raise those girls alone. You're an incredible mother. Hannah squeezed her hand. But they deserve the opportunity to know their father, even if it's only so that one day they can decide for themselves whether they want him in their lives. She paused. And you deserve the chance to find out whether he really changed or whether he's still the same idiot he was 4 years ago. What if he breaks their hearts? Claire's voice trembled. What if he promises them everything and disappears again? Then you'll be there to pick up the pieces, just like you always have been. Hannah squeezed Claire's hand again. But what if he doesn't break their hearts? What if he really wants to be their father? She looked directly into Claire's eyes. Would you take that opportunity away from them because you're afraid? Claire knew her friend had a point. But opening that door terrified her. He told me where he lives, Claire murmured. Then you know where to find him when you decide what you want. They talked until late. They drank wine, ate cookies, and Hannah eventually started telling ridiculous stories from work just to make Claire laugh. When her friend finally left around 2 in the morning, Claire was alone with her thoughts again. She walked into the girls' bedroom. Sophie was spread across her bed, arms wide as if she were flying. Ellie slept curled around the stuffed bear she had received on her first birthday. What should I do, my princesses? Claire whispered. How do I make the right decision for you? As if she had heard her, Sophie shifted in her sleep. Mommy. The green-eyed man will come back in my dream. Claire's heart jumped. What man, sweetheart? But Sophie was already deeply asleep. Claire stood there with more questions than answers. Maybe it was time to find some. 3 days passed. Ethan could think about nothing except Sophie and Ellie. He canceled 2 important meetings. He handed an investor presentation to his business partner, Michael. For the first time in nearly 10 years, he left the office before 6 o'clock 3 days in a row. On Thursday afternoon, Ethan was at home trying unsuccessfully to read a report when the doorbell rang. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Usually, the concierge called upstairs before allowing visitors through. When Ethan opened the door, his heart nearly stopped. Claire stood there. She was holding a folder of documents. She looked every bit as nervous as he felt. She wore dark tailored pants and a white blouse. Her chestnut hair fell loosely over her shoulders. She looked thinner than he remembered. And still, somehow, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Hi, she said. Her voice shook slightly. Ethan cleared his throat. Please. Come in. Claire hesitated, then stepped inside. She looked around the penthouse. The enormous floor-to-ceiling windows. The expensive designer furniture. The carefully controlled minimalism. You still like everything under control, she observed, noticing that every object seemed perfectly positioned. Some things don't change. Ethan closed the door. Coffee? Water? Wine? Coffee would be good. They walked into the kitchen. Ethan prepared coffee using an expensive Italian machine that probably cost more than many people made in a month. Claire sat at the counter and watched his movements. Precise. Controlled. Just like always. How did you get past the concierge? Ethan asked, trying to break the tension. I told them I was your architect. A faint smile touched Claire's mouth. Technically, it isn't a lie. I used to be your architect. Ethan smiled too. He remembered. 5 years earlier, Claire had designed the interior layout for the first major commercial property his company had developed. That was how they had met. She had presented innovative ideas for making small spaces feel open and functional. Ethan had been immediately impressed by her intelligence and creativity. Why did you come? He asked eventually. Claire held the coffee cup with both hands as if she needed the warmth for courage. Because the girls have spent 3 days asking me about the tall man with green eyes. Ethan's heart beat faster. And because I need answers before I decide anything. What answers? First, Claire looked directly at him. Did you really never see the ultrasound message? Or are you saying that because it makes you feel less guilty? The question was direct. Brutal. But Ethan knew he deserved it. I really didn't see it. He paused. Claire. I was angry. Hurt. When you left that night, I thought everything was completely over. He took a slow breath. When you tried to contact me, I didn't want to hear anything you had to say. I assumed it would be another argument. More pain. So you blocked me? Yes. Ethan lowered his eyes. And it was the worst decision of my life. Claire studied his face for a long time. She searched for signs of dishonesty. She found none. Second question. What do you want now? What do you mean? Why not walk away and pretend you never saw them? That was your specialty 4 years ago. Ethan felt the accusation. He accepted it. Because I can't. He ran a hand through his hair. Claire, I've spent 3 days thinking about them. I found pictures online. She raised an eyebrow. I know that sounds terrible. It does. But I couldn't stop myself. He continued. I look at them and I see pieces of myself. Except they're better than anything I've ever been. They're not perfect, Ethan. I know. No, you don't. They're real children. They have tantrums. They have bad habits. Sometimes they refuse to sleep. Sophie is afraid of the dark. Ellie is stubborn enough to argue with a wall. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. I know they're not a project I can plan and execute. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. I understand. He moved slightly closer but kept a respectful distance. Or at least I'm starting to. His voice softened. I know I failed you, Claire. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. He swallowed. But they're my daughters too. Claire stiffened. I want to try to become the father they deserve. And how long will that desire last? Her skepticism returned. Until the first important meeting conflicts with a school play? Until they start interfering with your perfect routine. Ethan knew he had earned every ounce of her distrust. You have no reason to believe me. He looked directly into her eyes. So I'll prove it. How? However long it takes. He paused. I canceled meetings this week just because I couldn't stop thinking about them. Claire said nothing. I'm the man who never canceled a business lunch for anyone. Ever. That should tell you something. Claire slowly drank the rest of her coffee. Third question. She looked up. What about us? Ethan froze. What about us? Why should I allow you into the girls' lives if it's going to confuse them about who we are to each other? Claire spoke carefully. We're former partners who happen to have children together. Nothing more. And that will remain true, regardless of what happens next. The words hurt more than Ethan expected. But he nodded. I understand. Claire stood. Okay. Ethan watched her carefully. You can meet them properly. His heartbeat exploded. Seriously? With conditions. Claire raised one finger. First, you will not tell them you're their father until I decide they're ready. Agreed. Second, if you enter their lives, it's permanent. I will not accept half measures. Agreed. Third, the girls come before everything. Work, meetings, your schedule, all of it. I agree. Claire stared at him. One final thing. Her voice hardened. If you hurt my daughters, Ethan, I swear you'll regret ever meeting me. Ethan knew she meant it. Strangely, it made him respect her even more. I will never hurt them. He hesitated. Or you. Claire's expression changed. You already hurt me. Her voice was quiet. I won't let you do the same to them. On Saturday morning, Ethan arrived at Central Park 15 minutes early. He had spent nearly an hour deciding what to wear. Not too formal. He didn't want to intimidate the girls. But not too casual either. He wanted Claire to understand how seriously he was taking the meeting. Finally, he chose dark jeans, clean white sneakers, and a navy polo shirt. He also brought 2 carefully selected gifts. For Ellie, who Claire had mentioned loved building things, he bought a construction set. For Sophie, who loved drawing, he brought a set of paints and brushes. Nothing extravagant. Nothing excessively expensive. Claire had been clear. She didn't want him trying to buy the girls' affection. When Ethan saw Claire approaching with the twins, his stomach tightened with nerves. The girls wore similar dresses in different colors. Sophie's was pink. Ellie's was blue. They ran ahead of their mother, excited about the outing. Look, Ellie. It's the tall man. Sophie shouted when she spotted Ethan. She waved enthusiastically. Ethan waved back with a genuine smile. Jeeves. You both look beautiful today. Thank you. Sophie performed a tiny curtsy. Mom said you're coming with us. If you want me to. Ethan looked toward Claire for guidance. Of course we do. Ellie replied. You can push us on the swings. Mommy always says she's tired. Ellie, Claire blushed. It's true, Sophie added helpfully. You always say your back hurts. Ethan laughed. Claire tried to look annoyed but couldn't hide her embarrassed smile. I would love to push you on the swings, Ethan said. But first, I brought you both something small. The girl's eyes widened. Presents. Small ones. Ethan glanced toward Claire. She gave him an approving nod. He handed them the gifts. The reaction was better than he could have imagined. Ellie hugged the construction set against her chest. Sophie was already opening the paint box to inspect the colors. Thank you so much. Ellie suddenly looked at him curiously. What's your name? Ethan glanced at Claire. Another slight nod. My name is Ethan. Sophie repeated it. Ethan. Then grinned. I like it. They walked toward the playground. The girls talked nonstop. School. Their friends. Their swimming teacher who was really cool but sometimes gets mad. Ethan absorbed every word, every laugh, every tiny detail of their personalities. At the swings he learned that Sophie liked being pushed high enough to scream with excitement. Ellie preferred slower swings so she could watch everything around her. Later, they rented a small boat on the lake. Sophie insisted on being captain. Ellie declared herself navigator and constantly pointed out where Ethan should steer. Claire watched from nearby during part of the afternoon. She held a book she barely read. Instead, she watched Ethan with the girls. He listened to them. Really listened. His face lit up whenever they laughed. Mom, Sophie shouted. Ethan says I'm an amazing captain. She really is. Ethan shouted back. Something moved inside Claire's chest. At lunch, they sat on a blanket eating sandwiches Claire had packed. The girls sat on either side of Ethan as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Ethan, do you have kids? Ellie asked while biting into her sandwich. Ethan nearly choked on his juice. He looked at Claire. She immediately tensed. No, he said carefully. But I would like to. Why don't you? Sophie asked with the complete honesty only a 4-year-old possessed. Ethan thought for a moment. I guess I haven't found the right children yet. Ellie tilted her head thoughtfully. How will you know when you find them? Ethan looked at the two little girls. At their brown hair glowing in the sunlight. At the green eyes identical to his own. At the smiles that already had complete control over his heart. I think I'll feel it right here. He placed his hand over his chest. A warm feeling that makes me want to protect them and take care of them forever. Sophie clapped. Like how I feel about my doll Alice. Exactly. Claire looked away quickly. Her eyes had filled with tears. Ethan was everything she had once dreamed he could be as a father. Attentive. Gentle. Patient. Sincere. And that frightened her more than anything else. Because maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about him. And if she had been wrong about Ethan as a father, maybe she had been wrong about other things too. At the end of the afternoon, the girls hugged Ethan goodbye in the parking lot, as if they had known him for years. Will you play with us again? Sophie asked hopefully. If your mom lets me, I would love to. Both girls immediately turned toward Claire with identical pleading expressions. Please, Mommy. Claire looked at Ethan. He was waiting for her answer with an almost childlike hope in his eyes. We'll see. But there was a small smile at the corner of her mouth. For the first time in 4 years, Claire began to wonder if maybe there was still hope for all of them. 2 weeks passed. Ethan became a regular presence in the girls' lives. He took them for ice cream on Wednesdays after preschool. He joined them for weekend walks. He even attended Sophie's dance performance at school, and recorded nearly every second on his phone like the proudest father in the audience. Claire watched everything with a mixture of happiness and anxiety. The girls were visibly happier. They constantly talked about him. Ethan said this. Ethan taught me that. Ethan promised he'd show us how buildings are made. The bond between them had become undeniable, and that both comforted and frightened Claire. One Thursday evening, Claire was preparing dinner in the kitchen when she overheard the girls talking in their bedroom. Ellie, Sophie whispered. Do you think Ethan could be our daddy? Claire froze. She slowly placed down the spoon she had been using to stir the sauce. Then she quietly moved closer to the bedroom door. I don't know, Ellie replied thoughtfully. But he has the same eyes as us. And he acts like a daddy, Sophie added. He always asks how school went. And he remembers all our friends' names. Maybe we can ask Mommy. Claire's heartbeat accelerated. She knew this moment would eventually arrive. The girls were too observant not to begin connecting the pieces. Girls, Claire called, forcing her voice to sound normal. Dinner's ready. During the meal, she noticed them exchanging secret looks. Clearly they were planning something. Finally, near the end of dinner, Sophie gathered her courage. Mommy, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Why does our daddy never come? Claire's chest tightened. Everybody at school has a mom and a dad. You know I love you more than anything in the world, Claire began carefully. And you have me, Grandma, Aunt Hannah. But it's not the same, Ellie said softly. A boy in my class said we're different because we don't have a daddy. Claire's heart broke. She had spent years trying to protect them from exactly this kind of pain. Your father is complicated. Does he not love us? Tears immediately appeared in Sophie's eyes. No. Claire stood quickly and wrapped both girls in her arms. No, sweetheart. That isn't it. She held them tightly. You are the most loved little girls in the world. She took a breath. Your father just didn't know you existed. Ellie frowned. How could he not know? Claire closed her eyes briefly. Maybe it was finally time to tell them at least part of the truth. Your dad and I had a big argument before you were born. She chose every word carefully. And I never managed to tell him. But you can tell him now. Sophie said eagerly. We can call him. It isn't that simple, princess. Why not? Ellie asked. If he didn't know, maybe he'll be happy when he finds out he has two beautiful daughters. The innocent logic of her children hit Claire like lightning. In a way they were right. And Ethan had spent the last 2 weeks proving that he genuinely wanted to be there. Claire looked at them. Would you like to meet your dad? Yes. They shouted together. Claire couldn't help smiling. Can he come have dinner with us? Sophie asked hopefully. We'll see. Claire kissed them both. Let Mommy think a little. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Claire called Ethan. Hello. His voice sounded surprised. Until then, they had communicated almost entirely through text when arranging visits. Ethan, it's me. Claire? Is everything okay? Are you busy? I'm never too busy for you. The words came out naturally. Claire paused. The girls are asking about their father. Silence. I think it's time to tell them the truth. Ethan didn't answer for several seconds. Claire. His voice cracked. Are you sure? No. She smiled sadly despite herself. But they deserve the truth. She took a breath. And you've proved that you're staying. What do you want me to do? Come for dinner tomorrow at 7. Ethan's breathing changed. I'll tell them before you arrive. Claire, thank you. Don't thank me yet. If you mess this up, Ethan. I won't. His answer was immediate. I promise. On Friday afternoon, Claire sat with the girls in the living room. Her heart beat so loudly she felt certain they could hear it. Girls, remember what we talked about yesterday? About your dad. Sophie nodded rapidly. You said you were going to think about it. Well, Claire took a deep breath. I thought about it. Both girls stared at her. And your dad is coming to dinner tonight. Their eyes widened. Really? Ellie shouted. Really? Claire smiled. But I need to tell you something first. She took another breath. You already know him. The girls exchanged confused looks. Claire spoke softly. Ethan is your father. Absolute silence. Then Sophie started bouncing on the couch. I knew it. Ellie, I knew it. I knew he was our daddy. Ellie reacted more quietly. She sat still, processing the information. Why didn't you tell us before? Because Mommy needed to make sure he would stay in your lives. Claire touched her daughter's cheek. And now I'm sure. Does Ethan know he's our daddy? Sophie asked. He knows. Claire smiled. And he is very, very happy. When Ethan arrived exactly at 7 carrying flowers for Claire and 2 small gifts for the girls, He barely managed to step through the doorway. Two little whirlwinds of energy ran straight into his arms. "Daddy." They shouted the word together. Ethan froze. Tears instantly filled his eyes. Then he dropped to his knees and wrapped both daughters tightly in his arms. "Hello, my princesses." His voice broke. He held them as if trying to make up for every hug he had missed during their first 4 years. Dinner felt like a celebration. The girls had a million questions. Where did Daddy live? Did he like cartoons? Could he play video games? Could he teach them how to drive when they were older? Could he help them with math? Ethan answered every question with endless patience. For the first time, he no longer had to pretend he was simply their mother's friend. He could be himself. Their father. During dessert, Sophie suddenly asked, "Daddy, can you sleep here tonight?" Ethan looked at Claire. She turned slightly red. "No, princess," Claire said gently. "Daddy has his own home. And you live here with Mommy. But don't families live together?" Ellie asked, confused. "Sometimes they do," Claire explained carefully. "Sometimes they don't. Mommy and Daddy are very special friends, and you'll spend lots of time with both of us." Eventually, the girls went to bed. Not before forcing Ethan to promise that he would come back on Saturday and take them to the zoo. Afterward, Claire and Ethan sat together on the small balcony. Each held a glass of wine. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. Claire looked at him. "For what?" "For giving me the chance to know them." He paused. "For trusting me." Another pause. "For everything." Claire studied his face in the soft light from the apartment. "You've changed, Ethan." "Have I?" "Yes." He looked out toward the city. "They changed me." His voice was quiet. "From the moment I saw them on that playground." Then he looked back at Claire. "And you changed too." She raised an eyebrow. "I see what you've done, Claire. You raised two incredible girls by yourself." His expression softened. "I see how fiercely you protect them. How much you sacrificed for them." He hesitated. "And somehow, after everything I did, you still found enough room in your heart to give me another chance." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known." "I had to be strong." She looked down at her glass. "I didn't have a choice." "There is always a choice." Ethan shook his head. "And you made the right one." For several minutes they sat quietly, watching the lights of the city. Finally Claire spoke. "Ethan." "Yes. I know I told you we were just two people who used to be together and happened to have daughters." Ethan waited. Claire stared into the distance. "But maybe." She hesitated. "Maybe we could try being a real family." Ethan stopped breathing. Claire continued quickly. Slowly. "No rusing. No pretending the past didn't happen." She finally looked at him. "But maybe we could try." Ethan's heart felt as though it had stopped. "Are you serious?" "I am." A shy smile appeared on Claire's face. The girls deserve the chance to have both parents. She swallowed. "And..." Ethan waited. "I still love you." Claire's voice trembled. "I never stopped loving you no matter how hard I tried." Ethan said nothing. Instead, he leaned toward her. Slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to move away. She didn't. He kissed her softly. It was not the desperate kiss of two people trying to erase the past. It was a kiss filled with forgiveness, hope, and a love that had survived 4 years of silence. When they finally pulled apart, Claire was crying. "Do you really think everything will be okay this time?" Ethan held her face gently between his hands. "It will." His voice was certain. "Because now I finally understand what actually matters." He brushed away one of her tears. "You and those two little girls are everything that matters to me." Suddenly, an excited voice came from the girls' bedroom. "Ellie, Mommy and Daddy are kissing." "Sophie, pretend you're asleep." Claire and Ethan burst into laughter. They held each other beneath the night sky, while their daughters whispered excitedly from the bedroom. For years earlier, one unread message had torn their lives apart. Now, after regret, pain, loneliness, and countless missed moments, they had somehow found their way back to one another. Not because the past had disappeared. It never would. But because Ethan had finally learned that success was not measured by skyscrapers, bank accounts, business deals, or magazine covers. It was measured by the people waiting for you at home, by two little girls calling you daddy, by a woman who had every reason to hate you, yet somehow found the courage to forgive, and by the decision to never again walk away from the people you loved. Some love stories do not survive because they are perfect. They survive because, after everything goes wrong, two people finally understand what they are willing to fight for. And this time, Ethan Carter knew there was nothing in the world powerful enough to make him lose his family again.